Chapter 9, Dr. Lanyon's narrative. So in this penultimate chapter, what we see is we have Dr. Lanyon now taking over the narrator's role, so to speak. Up until now, it's obviously been an anonymous narrator, told for you through the viewpoint of Utterson. We now know no more of Utterson directly. Chapter 9 is narrated by, as it suggests, Dr. Lanyon, and Chapter 10 is Dr. Jekyll's letter as well. So we're now seeing the letters that have been sent to each of the characters. We now see the letters that Utterson has received from both Dr. Lanyon and Dr. Jekyll. So structurally, it's a very interesting way to do it because we now get the resolution of the story, if you like. It's actually structurally now building up towards its climax. Technically, we've not had a climax. There's been no great problem that we've been confronted with, no great big bit of conflict necessarily as big as what's about to happen. And then we trail off obviously into the resolution and find out exactly what's been going on. So Dr. Lanyon's narrative. On the 9th of January, now 4 days ago, I received by the evening delivery a registered envelope addressed in the hand of my colleague and old school companion Henry Jekyll. I was a good deal surprised by this, for we were by no means in habit of correspondence. I had seen the man, dined with him indeed, the night before, and I could imagine nothing in our intercourse that should justify formality of registration. The contents increased my wonder, for this is how the letter ran. And my cat is playing up as well. 10th December 18 Dear Lanyon, you are one of my oldest friends, and although we may have differed at times on scientific questions, I cannot remember, at least on my side, any break in our affection. There was never a day when, if you had said to me, Jekyll, my life, my honour, my reason depend upon you, I would not have sacrificed my left hand to help you. Lanyon, my life, my honour, my reason are all at your mercy. If you fail me tonight, I am lost. You might suppose, after this preface, that I am going to ask you for something honourable to grant. Judge for yourself. And even the cat's distressed about it. Shh! I want you to postpone all other engagements for tonight. Aye, even if you were summoned to the bedside of an emperor, to take a cab unless your carriage should be already at the door, and with this letter in your hand for consultation, to drive straight to my house. Poole, my butler, has his orders. You will find him waiting your arrival with a locksmith. The door of my cabinet is then to be forced, and you are to go in alone, to open the glazed press, letter E, on the left hand, breaking the lock if it be shut, to draw out, with all its contents as they stand, the fourth drawer from the top or, which is the same thing, the third from the bottom. In my extreme distress of mind, I have a morbid fear of misdirecting you, but even if I am in error, you may know the right drawer by its contents. Some powders, a vial, and a paper book. This drawer, I beg of you. Sorry, my computer is running very slowly. This drawer, I beg of you to carry back with you to Cavendish Square exactly as it stands. So he's basically said to Lanyon, look, I really need your help. Here's a combination. Go into my house. You can get a locksmith because the door's locked, so break the door down. Go into my cabinet and take out the fourth drawer and bring everything within it. And within it, as he says, there's a vial, a little glass container like bottle, powders, and also a paper book. That is the first part of the service. Now for the second. You should be back if you set out at once on the receipt of this, long before midnight, but I will leave you that amount of margin, not only in fear of one of those obstacles that can neither be prevented nor foreseen, but because an hour when your servants are in bed is to be preferred for what will then remain to do. At midnight, then, I have to ask you to be alone in your consulting room, to admit with your own hand into the house a man who will present himself in my name, and to place in his hands the drawer that you will have brought with you from my cabinet. Then you will have played your part and earned my gratitude completely. 5 minutes afterwards, if you insist upon an explanation, you will have understood that these arrangements are of capital importance, and that by the neglect of one of them, fantastic as they must appear, you might have charged your conscience with my death or the shipwreck of my reason. So what he's saying is basically, you've got to do this for me. Bring the drawer and everything like that back to your house at midnight. You've got to let somebody in, and they'll say it's my name, and you've got to let them in yourself. Be alone. Don't let anyone see. Confident as I am that you will not trifle with this appeal, my heart sinks and my hand trembles at the bare thought of such a possibility. Think of me at this hour in a strange place, labouring under a blackness of distress that no fancy can exaggerate, and yet well aware that, if you will but punctually serve me, my troubles will roll away like a story that is told. Serve me, my dear Lanyon, and save. Your friend, H.G. So he's basically saying, come, let me into the house, basically. Give him that drawer, and then if you really want to still know what's going on, I'll tell you. He goes on to say, P.S. I'd already sealed this up when a fresh terror struck upon my soul. It is possible that the post office may fail me and this letter not come into your hands until tomorrow morning. In that case, dear Lanyon, do my errand when it shall be most convenient for you in the course of the day, and once more expect my messenger at midnight. It may then already be too late, and if that night passes without event, you will know that you have seen the last of Henry Jekyll. And that's just explaining there what exactly has all happened there. And he's saying, you know, if it doesn't arrive by tonight because the post office messes it up, then do it at some point tomorrow, go and get the drawer, and then again at midnight, this person will come and meet you. Of this letter, I made sure my colleague was insane, but till that was proved beyond the possibility of doubt, I felt bound to do as he requested. The less I understood of this farrago, the less I was in a position to judge of its importance, and an appeal so worded I could not be set aside without a grave responsibility. I rose accordingly from table, got into a hansom at the carriage, and drove straight to Jekyll's house. The butler was awaiting my arrival. He had received by the same post as mine a registered letter of instruction, and had sent at once for a locksmith and a carpenter. The tradesmen came while we were yet speaking, and we moved in a body to the old Dr. Dennon's surgical theatre, from which, as you are doubtless aware, Jekyll's private cabinet is most conveniently entered. The door was very strong, the lock excellent. The carpenter avowed he would have a great trouble and have to do much damage if force was to be used, and the locksmith was near despair. But this last was a handy fellow, and after 2 hours' work the door stood open. The press marked E was unlocked, and I took out the drawer, had it filled up with straw and tied in the sheet, and returned with it to Cavendish Square, obviously where he lives. So he's saying basically, yeah, that the locksmiths had to come, they've had to take the door off, and then he's gone and successfully managed to get the locker. Again, notice how at Jekyll's, this locked up door that Jekyll lives in is so secluded, or so separate from the rest of the amazing house. Remember when previous scenes, for example, when we've seen Utterson and Enfield chatting to him by the window, you have to go through a little courtyard. This removal of setting is incredibly important, and it remains a powerful way to show the reader the two differences between the two different worlds. Jekyll, the Victorian world, if you like, Jekyll's world of sensibility and responsibility, and then the Victorian dark side, where Jekyll seems to live behind the big door. Here I proceeded to examine its contents. The powders were neatly enough made up, but not with the nicety of the dispensing chemist, so that it was plain that they were of Jekyll's private manufacture. And when I opened one of the wrappers, I found what seemed to me a simple crystalline salt of white colour. The vial, to which I next turned my attention, might have been about half full of a blood-red liquor, which was a highly pungent to the sense of smell, and seemed to me to contain phosphorus and some volatile ether. At the other ingredients I could make no guess. So he's just saying basically it was this type of salt, a small glass vial half full of red liquid that smelled really badly. And he couldn't work out what the other ingredients were. He goes on to tell us, the book was an ordinary version book and contained little but a series of dates. These covered a period of many years, but I observed that the entry ceased nearly a year ago and quite abruptly. Here and there a brief remark was appended to a date, usually no more than a single word. Double occurring perhaps 6 times in a total of several hundred entries, and once very early in the list and followed by several marks of exclamation. Total failure! All this, though it whetted my curiosity, told me little that was definite. Here were a vial of some salt and the record of a series of experiments that had led, like too many of Jekyll's investigations, to no end of practical usefulness. How could the presence of these articles in my house affect either the honour, the sanity, or the life of my flighty colleague? If his messenger could go to one place, why could he not go to another? So basically he's saying that in this little book he found hundreds of different entries over a number of years, and with next to it, no fewer than 6 times, the word double occurred. And then once, very early in the list, after a lot of exclamation marks, the word total failure. And now Lanyon's saying, these ingredients and what he's found hasn't really answered anything. It certainly doesn't make sense why his loyalty and honour are at stake if Lanyon's unable to get these ingredients, so to speak. And it goes on to tell us, and even granting some impediment, why was this gentleman to be received by me in secret? The more I reflected, the more convinced I grew that I was dealing with a case of cerebral disease. So basically, he's in some way mad. He's in some way gone crazy. I was convinced I was dealing with a case of cerebral disease, and though I dismissed my servants to bed, I loaded an old revolver, a gun, that might be found in some posture of self-defence. 12 o'clock had scarce rung out over London, ere the knocker sounded very gently on the door. I went myself at the summons and found a small man crouching against the pillars of the portico. "Are you come from Dr. Jekyll?" I asked. He told me yes, by a constrained gesture, and when I had bidden him enter, he did not obey me without a searching backward glance into the darkness of the square. Should already be able to work out who this is. There was a policeman not far off, advancing with his bull's eye open, and at the sight I thought my visitor started and made greater haste. So basically he let him in, didn't really say anything, said he was there from Jekyll, and as he looked about he kept on looking behind him to see what was happening, and there was a policeman, and when he saw the policeman he seemed to try to go into the house even quicker. So it goes on to tell us that these particulars struck me, I confess, disagreeably, and as I followed him into the bright light of the consulting room, I kept my hand ready on my weapon. Here, at last, I had a chance of clearly seeing him. I had never set eyes on him before, so much was certain. He'd never seen him before. He was small, as I have said. I was struck besides with the shocking expression on his face. Here it is, with his remarkable combination of great muscular activity and great apparent debility of constitution. So he couldn't work out, a strange face, couldn't work out what it was about him. And, last but not least, with the odd subjective disturbance caused by his neighbourhood. This bore some resemblance to incipient rigour, and was accompanied by a marked sinking of the pulse. At that time I set it down to some idiosyncratic, personal distaste, and merely wondered at the acuteness of the symptoms, but I have since had reason to believe the cause to lie much deeper in the nature of man, and to turn on some nobler hinge than the principle of hatred. And that obviously begs the question, are people born inherently evil? Are people born evil? This appearance of this thing that is upon the door, who we can assume as being Mr. Hyde, has caused Lanyon to really question what it is and ask, is there natural evil in humans? This person, who had thus from the first moment of his entrance struck in me what I can only describe as a disgustful curiosity, was dressed in a fashion that would have made an ordinary person laughable. His clothes, that is to say, although they were of rich and sober fabric, were enormously too large for him in every measurement. the trousers hanging on his legs and rolled up to keep them far from the ground, the waist of the coat below his haunches, and the collar sprawling wide upon his shoulders, so he dressed in clothes far too big for him. Strange to relate, this ludicrous accoutrement was far from moving me to laughter. Rather, as there was something abnormal and misbegotten in the very essence of the creature that now faced me, something seizing, surprising, and revolting. This fresh disparity seemed but to fit in with and to reinforce it, so that my interest in the man's nature and character, there was added a curiosity as to his origin, his life, his fortune, and status in the world. So immediately Lanyon's fascinated by this horrible person. He's fascinated by the way he's dressed, the way he acts, the impression that he has upon him, and he wants to know more. These observations, though they have taken so great a space to be set down in, were yet the work of a few seconds. My visitor was, indeed, on fire with sombre excitement. "Have you got it?" he cried. "Have you got it?" And so lively was his impatience that he even laid his hand upon my arm and sought to shake me. I put him back, conscious at his touch of a certain icy pang along my blood. So when he touched on me, a strange sensation came over Lanyon. "Come, sir," said I, "you forget that I have not yet the pleasure of your acquaintance. Be seated, if you please." And I showed him an example, and sat down myself in my customary seat, and, with as fair as imitation of my ordinary manner to a patient, as the lateness of the hour, my nature of my preoccupations, and the horror I had of my visitor would suffer me to muster. So basically sat him down and tried to treat him like a normal being. "I beg your pardon, Dr. Lanyon," he replied civilly enough. "What you say is very well founded, and my impatience has shown its heels to my politeness. I come here at the insistence of your colleague, Dr. Henry Jekyll, on a piece of business at some moment, and I understood." He paused and put his hand to his throat, and I could see, in spite of his collected manner, that he was wrestling against the approaches of the hysteria. "I understand, a drawer." But here I took pity on my visitor's suspense, and some perhaps on my own growing curiosity. "There it is, sir," said I, pointing to the drawer where it lay on the floor behind a table and still covered with a sheet. He sprang to it and then paused and laid his hand upon his heart. I could hear his teeth grate with the convulsive action of his jaws, and his face was so ghastly to see that I grew alarmed both for his life and reason. "Compose yourself," said I. "Typical Victorian sensibilities. Compose yourself. Show no excitement. Show nothing. Show nothing out of character. Compose yourself," said I. He turned, look at the word choice, he turned a dreadful smile to me, and as if with the decision of despair, plucked away the sheet. At sight of the content, he uttered one loud sob of such immense relief that I sat petrified. And the next moment, in a voice that was already fairly well under control, "Have you a granulated glass?" he asked. I rose from my place with something of an effort and gave him what he wanted. So he wanted one of those speakers that you get in science. The glasses, they've got the measurements on it. So Lanyon got up and got him what he wanted. He thanked me with a smiling nod, measuring out a few minims of the red tincture, and added one of the powders. So he's got the red liquid, added the powder. The mixture, which was at first of a reddish hue, began in proportion as the crystals melted to brighten in colour, to effervesce, to fizz audibly, to fizz loudly, and to throw off small fumes of vapour. Suddenly, and at the same moment, here we go, a science word, the ebullition ceased and the compound changed to a dark purple, which faded again more slowly to a watery green. Look at the detail. We never see this detail. Stevenson is showing again, just like the fog rolling in. This evil transformation is happening, and the language with which he uses is beginning to get far more poetic. It's far more descriptive, far more detailed. Look at what the evil is, the effect is having upon the structure of the writing. It's turned, faded again more slowly to a watery green. My visitor, who had watched these metamorphoses, keyword, with a keen eye, smiled, set down the glass upon the table, and then turned and looked upon me with an air of scrutiny. And now, said he, to settle what remains, will you be wise? Will you be guided? Will you suffer me to take this glass in my hand and to go forth from your house without further parley? So will you let me just get the glass and go and leave the house? Or has the greed of curiosity, another thing that humans naturally must have, has the greed of curiosity too much command of you? Can you answer for yourself, or is the evil within, if you like, the other darker side of you going to answer for you? Think before you answer, for it shall be done as you decide. As you decide, you shall be left as you were before, and neither richer nor wiser. So he's saying, if you decide me to leave, that's fine. You'll be no wiser than before. You won't have learned anything less. Nothing will harm you. You won't have anything to be scared about, but you won't know anything amazing. Neither richer nor wiser, unless the sense of service rendered to a man in mortal distress may be counted as a kind of riches to the soul, Or, if you shall prefer to choose a new province of knowledge, and new avenues to fame and power shall be laid open to you in this room upon the instant, and your sight shall be blasted by a prodigy to stagger the unbelief of Satan. So yeah, he's saying here that you've got an Lanyon, you've got an option here, Dr. Lanyon. You can bid me farewell and allow me to go home, and you'll be none the wiser. You won't have a clue what's happened. You won't be unlocked to the secrets of the earth. But if you watch and if you allow me to stay and drink this and watch, the secrets of science that you never thought possible will amaze you, and you will you will question the existence of God and the devil. Sir, said I, affecting a coolness that I was far from truly possessing, you speak enigmas, and you will perhaps not wonder that I hear you with no very strong impression of belief. But I have gone too far in the way of inexplicable services to pause before I see the end. So because he's done so much already, his curiosity's been raised, he might as well just stay here and see what happens. And again, is Stevenson actually trying to say that curiosity, like evil, is natural and inherent within us all? We are unable to control it. It is well, replied my visitor. Lanyon, you remember your vows. What follows is under the seal of our profession. So you know what happens. You've got to be quiet. You can't tell anyone what happens. And now you have so long been bound to the most narrow and most material views. You who have denied the virtue of transcendental medicine. You who have derided your superiors. Behold, he says, you who have been so strict in the constraints of science. You are bound by science and what you have learned. What you have learned from books, your rational, your logic. That is what has restricted your understanding of life. And you've been bound for so long, and you have not even thought about the concept of transcendental medicine, of changing and things like that, the ability to change things. Just like Victorian society likes to keep up the idea that they know everything, the Victorians know how to act properly. They're the highest society which has ever walked this earth. They are the greatest, the British society, the greatest society on earth. The most intelligent, the most scientifically advanced. They think they know it all. And Jekyll is almost as a anti-Victorian, if you like. It's saying, you have derided your superiors, behold! And we're told, he put the glass to his lips and drank at one gulp. A cry followed. He reeled. Look at the word choice here. He reeled, staggered, clutched at the table and held on, staring with injected eyes, gasping with open mouth. And as I looked, there came, I thought, a change. Look at the complex sentence. He seemed to swell, to get bigger. His face became suddenly black, and the features seemed to melt and alter. And the next moment, I had sprung to my feet and leaned back against the wall, my arms raised to shield me from that prodigy, my mind submerged in terror. Look at this. One huge, long, complex sentence. This is huge. trying to obviously convey the idea, the speed at which this happens. He's creating tension, he's building it up. He is not giving us a pause for breath by using a full step. He's allowing us to witness the transformation, the metamorphosis with Lanyon discovered. He is allowing us to see it as well through our reading. "Oh God!" I screamed. And "Oh God!" Look at his reference specifically to God. The first thing he says is cry for the Lord. There is something evil upon him. "Oh God!" I screamed, and "Oh God!" again and again. For there before my eyes, pale and shaken, and half fainting, and groping before him with his hands like a man restored from death, there stood Henry Jekyll. What he told me in the next hour, I cannot bring my mind to set on paper. Look at Lanyon, just like Utterson, the idea of reputation. He does not want to know the truth, therefore he has silence. He will not speak, like Lanyon, like Utterson refuses to know the truth before he breaks down the door. He doesn't want to know what lies within. He wants to keep reputation intact. By writing this down, Lanyon is instantly discrediting and besmirching his reputation. I saw what I saw, I heard what I heard, and my soul sickened at it. And yet now, when that sight has faded from my eyes, I ask myself if I believe it, and I cannot answer. Even though he has witnessed it with his own eyes, Dr. Lanyon can still not bring himself to say, yes, science is wrong. We have discovered something here science cannot explain. Perhaps even religion is wrong. He died not long after, we know this. He questions his faith, just like Mr. Hyde warned him. He will question everything, including the devil. It will be it's like a prodigy, like a child, like a son, like a product of the devil with what he has seen. And even now, Lanyon is unable to accept it, or unsure if he can. He goes on to tell us, my life is shaken to its roots. Sleep has left me. The deadliest terror sits by me at all hours of the day and night. And I feel that my days are numbered and that I must die. And yet I shall die incredulous. Very quickly, we see the highlight there. Absolutely. Oops, sorry. And here as well, incredulous. Even though he knows that his knowledge of this truth that Jekyll is showing him, he still struggles to and refuses to believe it. As for the moral turpitude, which means wickedness, depravity, he tells us that he's always what he's seen will haunt him for the rest of his days, and he feels he cannot live much longer. He doesn't commit suicide, but the reason for living has ended for him. As for the moral turpitude that man unveiled to me, even with the tears of penitence, sorrow and regret, also an explicitly religious word, you do penitence if you sin, I cannot, not even in memory, dwell on it without a start of horror. I will say but one thing, Utterson, and that, if you can bring your mind to credit it, will be more than enough. The creature who crept into my house that night was, on Jekyll's own confession, known by the name of Hyde, and hunted for in every corner of the land as the murderer of Carew. Signed, Hasty Lanyon. An incredible account of what has happened. But again, just like Utterson and Enfield, he prefers silence rather than expose any dark truths. This is an incredible amount that's been told, but he will not tell us anymore. He doesn't even really tell us what he thinks or what he makes of it. He doesn't question his religion. He doesn't question science in his letter to Utterson, which Utterson obviously opened upon his death. So even still, the constraints of Victorian society once again forced Lanyon, even in his deathbed, to maintain his reputation and not to explain what happened through the letter. By doing so, exposes himself and corrupts his own reputation. So it is now left to Dr. Henry Jekyll's full statement of the case. It's up to Jekyll to now tell us in his dead letter what exactly happened, and to essentially solve the mystery for once and for all. Again, it's it's the climax that's been hit here. This is a climax that's been hit. The discovery of that, the fact that Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Hyde and Mr. Hyde is Dr. Jekyll, and it's now up to it's now up to for Jekyll to become the narrator and to explain to us exactly what has been happening. There are incredible quotes in this chapter. Go back, make sure you're making your own notes and make sure you're making your own analysis. Remember, it is not enough to simply copy what I say and spew it up in an exam. No, you must come up with your own analysis, developing on my analysis as well.